button for YouTube. We are now live on YouTube. So welcome to Virtually Connecting 2019 at Digital Pedagogy Lab. So we're going to do a little bit of a round of introductions. I'll start. My name is Christina Hendricks. I am a professor in philosophy at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And I'm also one of the Virtually Connecting buddies. So Joe, you want to go ahead next?
Hi, I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College in Granbury, Ohio, and one of your Virtually Connecting buddies.
And Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Hogue. I am an associate lecturer at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and I live in Sunnyvale, California, and I'm one of the co-directors and co-founders of Virtually Connecting.
Fantastic. So
I'm doing this on my phone for the first time, so bear with me if you see my hand occasionally.
It's looking pretty good, actually. So let's move to the on-site folks. Somebody introduce yourselves.
I'll start. My name is Ikra, and I work at Davidson College on the digital learning team. I'm a fellow on the team.
Okay, hi, my name is Cassie Nooyen. I am a rising sophomore at St. Norbert College in De Pere, Wisconsin, and I'm a computer science and math double major.
Hello, my name is Ruthie Tucker. I'm also a rising sophomore at St. Norbert College, and I am majoring in elementary education.
I'm Julie Fellmayer. I am a teacher from the International School of Brussels, and I am facilitating the play and practice track here at Digital.
I'm Nora. I'm a graduate student at Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, which is an affiliate of Middlebury College, so to elaborate. And I'm studying international education management, and I'm also an intern and a fellow at the Digital Office of Digital Learning and Inquiry.
Fantastic. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think I'd just like to start off by asking, are you all in the same stream at Digital Pedagogy Lab, or are you in different streams? And maybe one or two things that have stood out for you so far in your experience there.
So, are you gonna start?
No, I won't, but I can. I can.
We can go.
All right, hello. Cassie and I are in the same track. We are in the critical open pedagogy, and I guess it's been, to be honest, it's been kind of hard because the content is something I've never really dealt with before, and it's at a really high kind of academic level than what I'm used to. But like the people are great and really helpful and understanding, so it's been a great environment. It's just the content is a little too hard for me, but that's okay.
I would say one thing that stuck out with me would be the accessibility issues. We got to video call with Maha yesterday, so understanding the difference around the world, even with open textbooks, and how different they can be, was really eye-opening and something I didn't really think of ever.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would kind of second what Ruthie said. I'm in a different track than Cassie and Ruthie. I'm in, actually Julie, who's over here, led my track, which is play and practice, and we talk about imagination, like the faculty of imagination, and bringing play into pedagogy and teaching. But I've also the language of critical pedagogy and what that means, like this whole kind of area or field is new to me too. So at the first day or so was getting used to the buzzwords or words I kept hearing and thinkers that I didn't know about or I read about, but I wasn't that familiar with. And another thing that stood out to me, I feel like this conference is also like a movement. Like it's a movement space, and I've been to conferences like that before, but related to other issues, and I didn't realize that, so that's been exciting, or something I've begun to notice, like the activism and the justice movement that's going on, as well as the intellectual component, like it's hand in hand.
So I'm in the inclusive design track, and I actually want to affirm basically what Ikra said about being in a movement space, because so I'm at I'm a fellow for the Inclusive Design Studio that last semester Middlebury, or the D-Link at Middlebury and Middlebury Institute, basically we launched it with Sarah Lund-Watulik. And so we've been working kind of a lot on like what does inclusive design mean? And so coming here was to get more of an idea of that, to kind of expand that knowledge. But what I've been finding is that it's a lot of like the same stuff that we've worked out in the semester in terms of trying to, like, there's not a definition, right? And then hearing everybody's like viewpoints on that and kind of like affirming that, you know, whatever we've discovered or are trying to promote within the studio is all real, but also that it's very niche because, well, it's niche and it's not, because a lot of the conversations that we've been having, I feel like, have intersected a lot with just like discussions around diversity and inclusion initiatives, which has been like something that's like, you know, I'm more familiar with, not in the, you know, digital sphere, but just like outside of it in terms of talking about those issues critically when it comes to racism and you know, fostering identities and things of that sort. So it's been interesting to kind of see the balance between like how does that play into the digital space, but also how do we have, but at the same time, I feel like a criticism that I would put out with that is like, how do we have like new conversations about those in the digital space with solutions rather than like, we know that these things exist. And so it's just been a lot of like reaffirming things, and I will agree with like all the jargon and things. I think as students and people who are not like, we haven't been working in this field for ages, so a lot of it is just like, yeah, like totally understand. Yeah. So it's been interesting in terms of that, but also I think like it feels like drowning sometimes, where you're just like, I'm just trying to keep up with the language, and so yeah, that's been my experience.
Drowning in the stream.
Julie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think actually, so I was supposed to be a participant and ended up becoming a sub for the person who was supposed to teach my track, and what I have. And I teach K to 12. I teach elementary school. So teaching, this is my first time ever working with adults in this capacity. So, you know, that's been a big learning curve for me. But I think one of the things that's really, I guess I hope to be coherent here is about assumptions. You know, so everyone here is telling me that there was an assumption, maybe that we all had this similar understanding of critical pedagogy. I'm making assumptions in my track about, you know, how people are, how much people understand about critical pedagogy, how much people are on the same page with what it is that DigPed does, and also what it is that play looks like. And so it's in a classroom, when, you know, you're 3 days in and you're like, oh, I'm making a lot of assumptions. I'll change tack and quickly adapt to this. And that's fine in a semester. And here it's like, oh God, I hope I have enough time to, you know, make, you know, alter things so that we can, you know, make sure that some of those assumptions are rectified. Yeah.
Great. So I'm showing the whole screen of all of us in case Rebecca or Joe would like to ask anything.
I'm trying to think of useful, interesting questions. It sounds really neat, in part because a lot of my work is actually in these areas that you're talking about inclusion and accessibility. And I guess my question would be whether you've hit takeaways, whether you've had either stories or resources that are fitting the, I have to put this in someone else's hands because I'm giving you my hands. If you do, I'll take it.
Sorry, can you read what was the last part of your question?
What have been some of the really good takeaways that you want to give to somebody back at your institutions?
Okay. So before Monday, I had never encountered licensing or that sort of thing, or heard about OER. open educational resources, as I've learned. And it's just been great learning about it, and like learning about this thing that more like colleges should implement and use, and like how I as a student can try to advocate for that, try to get like professors to understand the student perspective more, instead of just having another colleague tell them what they should be doing, if that makes sense.
I think me and Ruthie are in a really unique position is when we go back to campus, we can start talking to professors about how we think this would help the students. Because if the professors, like she said, if the professors keep telling professors, they're not going to really listen. But the fact that we're in a unique position to tell the faculty in that, like how much this would impact us and how much it would affect our learning, I think it's just a really unique position, especially being so young that we're in. And like we still have 3 more years of the college to help kind of try to foster this change and like be like a different kind of advocate instead of like at the top level, kind of going from the bottom as a like younger student and pushing change up.
So it sounds like my takeaway should be find a student to send next year.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
I mean, they'll be lost in the jargon, but like it's good.
No.
They'll get something out of it.
It's also really valuable, like to know. I have never seen my teachers or professors, like what goes on behind the scenes, like the conversations and the constructions and the thoughts and ideas. Like I see the course and I'm the student and I take it and there's all this like trust in it and all the assignments. So seeing kind of the background conversations of teachers, educators talking to one another was really eye-opening. I'm not sure what it does as a student, but I think it does something, you know, like understanding the process that goes into crafting a course and what it can involve. Like, it probably is going to make me a better student.
Yeah, that's such an interesting. Go ahead.
I've also kind of learned, I don't want to say like the dark side of education, but how hard it is to make a change in education. Like I never really understood that, and like how hard it is to get something to the top. And I would say at our college, we have a pretty open like leadership that kind of is okay with making this change. And over the past years, especially with implementing domains, has really been okay with more stuff than I've heard around other institutions. So being able to like look back at the whole country and even the world and like not just in a bubble of Wisconsin has really been eye-opening, and like realizing that it's not easy, but it's something that does need to be done.
Yeah, I wanted to go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I honestly don't know how to answer that question because it feels a little bit overwhelming, just kind of like all the messages that we've getting and absorbing, because there is a dark side, and just like when you're not, well, for me, you know, not really being fully immersed in the field and kind of in the work, it feels like, you know, what can be done. Like it just feels like so much that I don't even know how to take the first step. So yeah, but it's not really much as like this. I don't know.
I was going to say something that this is just such interesting feedback. I've only been to one digital pedagogy lab, and being someone who's kind of immersed in a fair bit of the literature and the discussions, it's really useful to hear the response from people who are not so immersed and what that feels like. And so thank you. That's super, super interesting. I also really like the idea of kind of peeking behind the scenes of what we do. So I teach, but I'm also I'm a director of a professional development center for teachers. So, you know, people talk about teaching all the time, right? That's just part of what we do. And I think I had never really thought about what does that sound like from a student perspective? You know, did you kind of realize like how much thought and effort can go into these things? So I really appreciate you sharing that.
So I have a question for you guys. You mentioned the sense of movement right? That you sense that this was a movement. I guess my question is, what can the movement do to make you feel more welcome into the movement, to be part of it?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. For something that I always find gaps for, which I know is really hard to even implement, is interconnecting everything in terms of how that is relevant to something that's a different field or profession. And I feel like I wonder if everything that is done in this like ed tech sphere around these topics is, I wonder if that's a silo, you know, and I wonder if that's like how much cross-pollination there is to feel like, you know, this isn't just a world of its own where if you don't know the jargon, that you can't have those conversations. So that's just kind of how I wonder about like the I don't know if translatability is a word, but just, yeah, that transferability to, you know, education, like all of these topics and these things that we talk about education that impacts like everything else that we do in a society. And like if those connections were made more evident, maybe to show that continuation of like, you know, we have this person who is brought in, or I mean, I don't think I'm describing it very well, but just kind of to show like that this impacts everything. It does impact everything, but also those people from those different spheres are a part of us. And, you know, even if like, say, if you don't continue on this path and you go off to like become a doctor or something, that this knowledge that you have, you're bringing into that, you know, in the medical field, and your colleagues and all of those things. So this kind of interconnectedness to feel like if I don't continue on this path, or, you know, even if this was like a one-time experience, or like people can come and go and kind of like take that knowledge with them and then continue it. And then, you know, it's everywhere.
Yeah, for me, I don't want to say I feel out of place at this conference, but I'm not in education. I'm computer science and math. I don't consider myself to be a good teacher, but like being in open pedagogy is just, it's important for the fact of like, it helps you to work better in like groups, I would say, just in general, like being able to feel like connected and like on an equal level. Like to me, was really stuck out in open pedagogy. And like, seeing as I don't think I'll ever be like in a true like educational like higher ed role after I graduate, and I can definitely take some of the stuff I've learned here out into like the workforce meetings, or even different like classes I'm in, and like different ways to like even like work on homework, and just little bits of knowledge that it may not impact me like in education, but it'll impact me in my life.
I was just gonna say, I went to Camp Critical Pedagogy before this as well. And I've been to DigPed before. Christina, I was at the Vancouver one with you. The Camp Critical Pedagogy, I know that's something that they really want to do more often. There were some really big topics that we fleshed out in that I think help inform being here. And perhaps but then the problem is that, you know, you have to have the ability to come for 7 days instead of 5 days. You have to be able to pay for 7 days instead of 5 days. So I wonder if it's possible as well to have, you know, DigPed and Camp Critical Pedagogy run simultaneously, perhaps, or, you know, the option to go back and forth between, like if they were to be run simultaneously, to go back and forth between them, or to have like tracks that ran in the afternoon, and, you know, I don't know, something like that. It's because I do think that, you know, I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Cassie.
Cassie's right. Like a lot of these the themes within critical pedagogy are so informative as you go throughout the world in a multitude of fields, the way that you start to look more critically at your impact in, as a designer, as a scientist, as a as a business person, they can be so helpful. And also, it sounds to me a little bit, because I'm not in higher ed as well, I completely understand the sense of like, yes, of course, the OER. I know exactly what you're talking about. I can understand that, a cheat sheet probably would be also a really good idea. Just a cheat sheet, like a little glossary in the program.
The kind of hard thing with our program too is there's not really great definitions for some of these things.
Oh.
It's like the first day, like our leader had us try to come up with definitions for these things. And I have a feeling we're going to be doing it again on Friday. And like that's kind of the hardest thing is there's not concrete like definitions. Like there's some like little words that have definitions, but the main topics we're talking about, the hardest thing is that there's no concrete like definitions, and that's what it's kind of just hard to understand. And sometimes it can just feel a little bit overwhelming. But I've learned that little walks around the halls are good. Like 3-minute breaks, very, very helpful. Yeah.
Speaking of halls, what kind of hallway conversations are you having?
You just started saying that. Don't worry.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not in the halls that much. I'm usually either in a track. Like I don't have that much time because I'm like walking quickly to lunch or going back and I'm right back in the track. So I'm talking about track related things. But in the halls, I'll either be asking about how the tracks are going. Like I'm curious content wise, like what they're discussing. So if I see a teammate Thomas, like I'll ask him, oh, what are you, I told him I'm trying to vicariously live through him on his digital identity track because I'm in play and practice. So I'll ask him, oh, what are you discussing? What are you making? And he'll tell me digital identity maps or something. Or I just had a hallway conversation with my boss Sunday. and we were talking about how I think for some reason the digital world doesn't feel as real to me as the face-to-face physical world. Like I have this thing where I was in another workshop that was called object-based digital learning, and I did an exercise which made me realize the in-print version of the artifact felt my experience with it was really different. So a small conversation about reality. So to summarize.
Solve that for us.
I would say today at lunch, I got a cool experience. I got to meet someone that got to comment on one of my blogs that I wrote after domains. So I'm kind of getting to like meet everyone that, because I went to domains, but I was super overwhelmed. It was my first conference. I didn't know anyone except the 2 people I was with. And I was introduced to a lot of great people, but it was just really overwhelming. It was only a 2-day conference, so we weren't there for very long. And then I wrote blog posts after, and like people were commenting and sharing them, and finally kind of getting to meet those faces that you see online. It definitely feels more real. Sometimes you forget people online are real people, which is a problem, but.
Well, we like to think of virtually connecting as a kind of hallway conversation. So that it's the sort of thing where people who aren't able to attend get that aspect of conferences, because sometimes conferences will have live streams of various things, but what you won't get is an actual just sit down and have a chat about what's going on. So we really appreciate you doing that for us. Are there other things anybody would like to share or ask about? We're coming up on our 30 minutes. We usually try to keep it around 30 minutes. No?
I just wanted to say hi to Cassie. I think you were on the virtually connecting session that I was on.
Probably.
At Open Ed. And I think, did you write the your blog post about the constantly changing your domain,
Yep.
the never done this, my students loved it. So 'cause
Thank
I
you.
had shared it with my students were just starting their domain at that point.
Yep.
And they all found it very, very helpful. So thank you.
The blog post is about what I've learned in the year of having my domain. One is security issues. One is that it's okay to change your mind. It's actually encouraged and better for you. One is for asking for help, because I always want to pretend I can do everything. And a lot of the like things I've done and different things I've learned are because I asked for help. And I can't remember the fourth thing, but there are 4 different lessons I learned in the first year of my domain.
That's fantastic. Sounds like it was useful to other students too. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thanks to those who are on site for sharing your time with us. I know that a conference is a really busy time, so we appreciate you taking 30 minutes to chat with us.
Can we see the t-shirts?
Oh,
There was
yeah.
something about the free
There was something
t-shirts.
about t-shirts.
We never got to see what they were.
Call for free t-shirts at some point. I wasn't in the
Yeah,
hallway.
we were here.
We were walking in.
Yeah, so, what is the organization? Real College.
Oh.
That Sarah Goldrick Rab is associated with.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So Digital Pedagogy donated, the conference donated $200 to Real Hope and gave away 8 free t-shirts.
Wow.
And then also another $50 for her books. So then, yeah.
And there are 3 different t-shirts
There's
and
3
they all
different
say
t-shirts. Oh, I
different
found them.
things. And this one is #RealCollege.
Cool.
And then the back says students are humans first.
Oh, fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This one is the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice. And on the back it says, Hope has a strategy.
Cool.
Ooh, I like that.
And
But wait, there's more.
there's more.
3 or
Let's see here.
Oh, it's in white.
If you think college costs too much, vote.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah,
Super cool.
they are great.
Yeah.
And they're so soft. They're
This is
so
a different
soft. Oh, no, it's different. Oh, I got a different one. So this one says,
Real College.
Real College, and the back says, we will rise.
Oh, excellent.
We will which?
Rise.
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 Oh, excellent.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your year-conference. And I hope that at some point the overwhelmedness will feel a little bit less and the words will be used more than once and they will start to make more sense.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to take off the live on YouTube. So thanks again. We're stopping live stream.
Thank you. Bye.